This week's children message comes from chapter 4 of the story for children entitled Out of Egypt. Just as background, when Jacob moved his family from Canaan to live with his son in Egypt, they were a clan of about 70 people. For hundreds of years, God's people lived peacefully, safely in Egypt, and their numbers grew. But then a new Pharaoh took over, and he was afraid of God's people because their commitment to God was strong. They'd become a powerful nation just as God had promised. So the king of Egypt forced them to work as his slaves. But God had a plan. He wasn't going to allow his people to be slaves forever. God would lead them to the land he had promised. But first, God had to find a leader to guide his people into freedom. A Hebrew woman named Jochebed gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Pharaoh wanted all the Hebrew baby boys killed, so Jochebed hid her precious child to keep him safe. "Please, God, help save my son," she prayed. Jochebed placed the baby in a basket and floated it in the Nile River. Miriam, the baby's sister, watched from a distance. When Pharaoh's daughter came to the river to bathe, she spotted the basket in the reeds. "Poor child," said the princess. "He's a Hebrew baby. I will keep him as my own, and I will call him Moses, because I brought him out of the water." Moses became the son of the princess. He grew up in the palace in Egypt. But when Pharaoh tried to kill him for harming an Egyptian, Moses ran away to the desert. Moses lived in the desert of Midian for many, many years. One day, on Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, Moses noticed a bush that was covered in flames. He wondered to himself, why isn't the bush burning up? Suddenly, a voice boomed out of the flames, "Moses, Moses, do not come any closer. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I have heard the cries of my people. I am going to rescue them. Go back to Egypt. Tell Pharaoh to let my people go." Now Moses was shaking. "No, Lord, not me. Who am I to talk to Pharaoh? Send somebody else." "I will be with you, Moses. Here is a sign to show that I sent you. Throw your staff onto the ground and it'll turn into a snake." Moses did as God had instructed. And the snake slithered on the ground where the staff had been. Moses grabbed the snake's tail and it turned into a staff again. Moses saw God's power. Now Moses was ready to lead God's people. Moses entered Pharaoh's throne room. "The God of the Hebrews wants his people to worship him in the desert. Let my people go and worship God." "No," Pharaoh said, "I need them here." "God Almighty is angry with you, Pharaoh. He'll cause things to happen if you don't listen." So God sent a plague. The Nile River flowed red with blood. The water in it, all the ponds, the pools, and the fountains turned to blood as well. "Make it stop," cried Pharaoh. So Moses prayed to God, and the water in Egypt flowed clean and sweet and clear again. A week later, Moses went to Pharaoh and said again, "Let my people go." Pharaoh again said no. So God sent a second plague to show Pharaoh his power. The frogs invaded Egypt. They splashed in the water. They rolled in the dirt. They climbed in the windows and jumped on their bed. "Make it stop," cried Pharaoh. So Moses prayed to God, and the frogs jumped back into the Nile River where they belonged. Then God sent a third plague, and dust on the ground turned into tiny, nasty gnats. They buzzed in the air. They landed on the people and the animals. Moses went to Pharaoh again and said, "Let my people go." Pharaoh said, "No." So God sent a fourth plague. Thick swarms of flies poured into Pharaoh's palace and the houses of the Egyptians. Every building, every barn, every porch, every kitchen was covered with flies. "Make it stop," cried Pharaoh. So Moses prayed to God, and all the flies flew away. Then God sent a fifth plague. All the livestock in the fields of Egypt died. The horses, the donkeys, the camels, the cattle, the sheep, and the goats would just fall over dead. But Pharaoh would still not let God's people go. Then God told Moses to throw handfuls of soot from the furnace into the air. He did, and nasty sores called boils broke out on all the people and the animals. That was the sixth plague. Moses went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." Pharaoh said, "No." So God sent a seventh plague. He sent hail and thunder and lightning. It was the worst storm Egypt had ever seen. The hail flattened the crops in the field and stripped the leaves off the trees. "Make it stop," cried Pharaoh. So Moses prayed to God, and the hailstorm ended. Then God sent an eighth plague. Swarms of locusts covered the land, and they ate all the plants in every tree. The insects filled the houses of Pharaoh and all the Egyptians. "Please make it stop," cried Pharaoh. So Moses prayed to God, and the wind blew the locusts away. Then God told Moses to point to the sky. Moses did, and suddenly a thick darkness covered Egypt. And for 3 days the people couldn't see anything. This was the ninth plague. God told Moses he had only one more. At midnight, the Lord said, "I will go through every house in the land of Egypt, and every firstborn son in every household will die. But my people will be safe. This will be the worst plague of all. Then Pharaoh will let my people go." And it all happened just as God said. "Get out now," cried Pharaoh. "Take what you need and leave." So Moses and God's people left. Moses led the people through the desert to the shore of the Red Sea. The people looked straight ahead and saw only water. And they turned around and saw Pharaoh's army charging after them across the desert. "We're going to die," they cried. But Moses said, "Don't be afraid. The Lord will fight for you. Be calm and watch what God will do." And so Moses raised his staff towards the sea. And suddenly the wind blew and the water piled up into huge walls, leaving a dry path through the center of the Red Sea. The people walked to the other side of dry ground God provided. Pharaoh's chariots and soldiers raced after the people. When the entire army of Pharaoh was in the middle of the sea, God made the walls of water crash back in on them. And the sea swallowed up the Egyptian army, the chariots, and all the horses. But God's people were safe on the other side.